Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our common chess games played by computer series. So in this series we're covering some great games that have been played by top engines like AlphaZero, Leelenstein, Dragon Engine and many more. And today we are continuing our mini series about the French defense because our last video was a beautiful game played by Stockfish 15 in the Paulson French defense, and the Stockfish applied really in that game a beautiful bad bishop strategy, won the game with really great positional approach. But today we'll see again a tactical beast. Today we'll see again the tactical Stockfish 15 again in the French defense, but with a different approach, I think, with the wilder continuation, with a more dynamic play. And that's exactly what we want to see, because especially in the French defense sometimes the games can be so boring, sometimes the position is so blocked out, then you're just searching for maneuvers just in order maybe to improve slightly your piece or something. So as I said, sometimes it's a tough positional battle, but not in this game. Today, as I said, we'll see again a tactical approach by Stockfish 15. So let's see now the game. Its opponent was Leelenstein, also respected top engine now of these days, and here Leelenstein opened with the move e4. Stockfish response as promised is now the French defense with the move e6. So we have d4 d5, and after move e5 we have now the so-called advanced variation. And okay, let's stop and evaluate again a little bit position. Let's talk about the normal strategies and also about evaluation of pieces. So it's very important to recognize, we have talked about also these ideas in my previous video, but let's repeat, because maybe you're watching one of my videos for the first time and maybe you're not familiar with the strategies. When we created this block pawn structure like this in the center, it's obviously going to coordinate your further attack. Black's coordination will obviously be towards the queen side, because here the small pawn chain is showing us the direction of the attack, and of course white will coordinate the attack towards the king side, because also the small pawn chain is showing that direction. When we talk about evaluation of pieces, notice that actually here the bishops are not so much powerful than knights, because the pawn structure is blocked. So actually I think in this types of structures the knights are equal to bishops. And when we talk about bishops themselves, I think the bishops that are good here is of course the light square bishop of white, because it can be maneuvered here maybe to d3, where it continues here the pressure on both diagonals. But here I think the dark square bishop of blacks is perfectly fine, because it supports the further attack here on the queen side. But when we talk about bad pieces, obviously here the light square bishop of blacks is a bad piece, because it's blocked out by its own pawn structure. And even here the dark square bishop of white is a bad piece, because it's also blocked out by this central pawn chain here, this d4 e5 pawn chain that white has built in the beginning of the game. So as I said, when we talk about pieces, notice that actually what you want to get is maybe you want to get rid of this bishop, and from white perspective you want to get rid of this bishop. So that's why wait a little bit here in this types of structure. You want to have first a clarification, then maybe it's time maybe to give up the bishop for a knight or something else. So far, as I said, also the knights are equal here to bishops. So here in the continuation we have c5. Stockfish continues simply the pressure on the side where Stockfish is better. On the queen side, as we said, we are attacking simply this side because of this directed pawn chain. So c3, knight to c6, knight to f3, queen to b6. Every move now by black is simply an attack here on the queen side. So we have now a3, and now a very important move c4, because if you don't do that, if you do something else, then b4 will happen here from white's perspective, and suddenly you don't gain anything. Suddenly white should be much better. So that's why after move c4 white is also here the space advantage on the 5th rank, but now black is also space advantage here on the 4th rank. So both engines have here now at least one pawn on the other side of its opponent. So here in continuation we have knight from b to d2, knight to a5. Very important move to block out the potential b3 move if b3 happens. If you don't do that, if you play something else, then b3 will happen, and then suddenly with rook to b8 actually white is taking over on the queen side, where you are supposed to be better here from black's perspective. Actually you are better on the queen side, and now suddenly if you allow your opponent b3, actually white is better. So that's why very important defensive move, knight to a5, blocking out the further progress on the queen side. So bishop to e2, Leelenstein prepares here kingside castling, bishop to d7, kingside castling, and now h6. So it is now a similar position also of the video that we have analyzed a couple of days ago. Again h6, preventing knight to g5. Again, if you don't do that, then knight to g5 could happen, f4 f5 and similar stuff, g4 maybe Also some tactical threats are here with knight takes f7, so that's why h6 again also a very important prophylactic move here by Stockfish 15. So we have rook to b1, continuing here the pressure around the square b3. We have knight to e7 and now a4. Leelenstein is blocking out further the queenside, and is preparing now maybe in a slow way here to move b3. So we have here now knight to f5, and if you're asking yourself the question why didn't black castle queenside immediately, actually this is not working, because castling queenside actually is a suicide here for black. Look what happens, for instance, queen to c2. Now you play something like king to b8. Okay, you're improving the position of the king, but look at this now, b4, and that's the position that you don't want to allow here white in the continuation of the game. That's exactly what you're trying to prevent, because if you allow b4 or b3 in a good way here for white, then you're tactically lost, because look at this. Okay, you can maybe take knight takes b3. Okay, white can be challenged with this move. Bishop to a4 is of course perfectly fine here for black, but actually look at this with knight to d2. White has lost the pawn, but has now finally opened the position and has now really a dynamic game against the king on the b file, against the queen on the b file. Now you could maybe try knight to f5, but look at this, queen to a2 is going to happen. You're getting out of this pin, and now look at this position is, I think, beautiful for white. White will open eventually the position with knight to c5, and I think it's game over here for black. The evaluation is here 2.5 for in white's favor, so believe me, I think many players, many great players would simply lose this position from black's perspective. So as I said, this is not working. You should be careful here. After move a4, you see b3 is this really huge tactical threat. So we have here knight to f5, we have rook to e1, and now here bishop to e7. If g4 of course happens, then you have this opportunity, knight to h4, knight to h4, bishop to h4. Now bishop to g5 could happen, and black is controlling very important dark squares here in the continuation of the game. So that's why here after move bishop to e7, we have here g3 in the continuation. Now rook to c8. So as I said, this is a very important move by Stockfish 15. Rook to c8 without castling. Stockfish stays now with the king a little bit in the center further, but now notice that this move b3 that could happen is actually not working, because after c takes b3 also the c3 pawn is hanging. So it's now a different method that Stockfish will apply here, and look how Stockfish will secure the king without castling. Stockfish will invent sort of a new method how to secure the king, but without playing the normal method. So rook to c8, very important move to control this actually b3 move. This is the huge threat, the move b3. So here we have h3 by Leelenstein. We have king to d8 by Stockfish. Look how Stockfish moves the king without castling, as I said, because we have to say kingside castling in this types of position is a suicide. First of all, your knight is a little bit loose here, but this is a position that you don't want to get, because obviously, as we said in the beginning, this pawn chain, this advantage on the 5th rank is much better for white. So that's why white has, I think, a better game here on this side. So in the near future, f4 f5 could happen, g4 g5. So white could have really some fun on this side of the board. So that's why king to d8. Look at this, queen to c2. Now rook to c7 by Stockfish, still controlling here the c3 a little bit, because there is also maybe the threat of knight takes d4. Look at this, the queen is a little bit here. If the c file opens, then the queen could be in danger. So as I said, rook to c7, now rook to a1, and now Stockfish maneuvers the king here towards the queen side. Look at this, rook king to a8. It was even played by Stockfish 15, but at least the rook stayed on the c file, and Stockfish got the king out towards the queen. So really a beautiful sort of castling method by Stockfish 15. So here after move rook to a8, we have queen to a2, and we have rook to c6, we have king to g2, and now rook to g8. So Stockfish is saying, I have secured here the attack on the queen side, so b3 was never now a threat. Now when this position got secured on the queen side, it's now time to attack the king side. So really good strategy here by Stockfish 15, where it realized that it has some problems here on the queen side, solved the problems, and now coordinate the attack simply towards this side of the board, and it's now continue new pressure. So here queen to b1, we have a6, we have bishop to c2, queen to c7 was played by Stockfish 15, controlling further here the c3, because again, look at this, if b4 happens, okay, we can take c takes b3, you can take knight takes b3, but now look at this, rook to c3. So this is now the huge problem. This piece is lost. Also the bishop is now hanging, the d4 is now suddenly weak, this bishop can come into the game, this bishop can come into the game. Still, as I said, you don't want to lose the pawn in this way. So although white has maybe now an open position against the king, but now the king is on a8, we can also maybe include this rook into the game. So every piece is perfectly fine here by black. So as I said, this b4 b3 idea by white is not working anymore because the rook is controlling the c file. That's why it made me really this method rook to c7 and then this maneuver by the king really important. So Stockfish, as I said, realized it's a defensive problem. So here knight to f1 instead of this b4 method was played by Leelenstein. We have queen to c8, and here Stockfish 15 is already attacking actually the h3 pawn, although it's a long run to the h3 pawn. But Stockfish is saying, I am already there. Now I'm trying to play the move f6. I'm trying maybe to play the move g5. I'm actually trying here to open the position finally. And here Stockfish, as I said, maneuvers simply now more pieces towards the king side. So we have now knight to e3, knight takes e3, bishop to e3, and now f5. F5 is very risky. If you allow your opponent to stay with the move f5, then actually look at this with g5, with h5, I don't know, maybe f4, g4, black is taking over. Black will destroy you, I think, with this pawn storm on the king side. So that's why you have to take here en passant, e takes f6. But now look at this, after g takes f6, suddenly, in my opinion, this was a critical moment of the game. In my opinion, this is the moment where Stockfish took over, because the g file is open now, e5 is even working, and as I said, look at this, the battery here is suddenly working. The h3 becomes now a huge tactical problem. So already with the move queen to c8, Stockfish noticed that this could be the main target, the weak square on h3. Really wild stuff. So here in continuation, we have queen to d1, we have a bishop to d6, now attacking also the g3 square. Look at this, this is not a pleasant position now for white to play anymore. So we have here now knight to h4, knight to b3, cementing now the queen side. With this move, Stockfish is again saying, I am solving again possible problems on the queen side. If you take, for instance, bishop to b3, then look at the c takes b3. If you take queen to b3, now look at this, queen to b8 is going to happen. How are you going to protect this square g6? You have to g3, pardon me, you have to play something like king to f1. You have to get out of this mess. Now look at this, e5, you play maybe d takes e5, you take bishop to h3, comes with the check. Now you take with the bishop. Look at this, both of these bishops are dancing in front of white's king. Bishop to g3 is a huge threat. Queen to g3, you're getting checkmated or something. So this is not working for white. So that's, as I said, after move knight to b3, actually white doesn't have even time to face this knight on b3, doesn't have time to react correctly here. So that's why here in the continuation, king to rook to b1, getting out of this attack by the knight. So you see, Stockfish took over, I think, on both sides. Stockfish has now an advantage on the queen side, but has now also a beautiful attack on the king side. So it's really a beautiful open game played by Stockfish. So we have now e5, again opening this long diagonal for the bishop on h3, d takes e5, f takes e5, queen to d5, but now bishop to e6, first attacking the queen. Here in the continuation, we have queen to f3, and now a rook to f8. So Stockfish is not rushing. Stockfish is saying, I can take whenever I want to take this pawn on h3. Here in the continuation, queen to e2, and now finally, after a couple of tempi, now it was simply time to take out this weak pawn on h3. So bishop to h3, king to h2, and now knight to c5. And this move is very important, because what Stockfish is trying now to do is to play here the move e4, and then to cement this knight on d3. This could be really monstrous knight. Then you have to give up your bishop for the knight on d3, and that's a position that you don't want to get, because if you give up in any case your bishop for the knight, then I think you could have really some light score problems here. Then you're always vulnerable to some checkmate threats. So that's why, as I said, it's not so easy now for white to defend this position. So that's why Leelenstein played simply bishop to c5, is saying, I don't tolerate your knight here in the center of the board. So that's why here after move bishop to c5. And okay, let's stop and evaluate the position now. okay, we have now an open game, and now we have to really say it. In the beginning it was a block pawn structure, now it's an open game where the bishops are much better. So that's what I meant in the beginning. You should not evaluate immediately as your bishop as your better piece against the knight. It's not obvious. Now it's obvious because the position is open, the position is more clarified. That's a position that we have waited for. Now it's obviously a good here game for the bishop. And now also we have to say the f2 pawn is weak, so white has now to make a reaction. So we have now f3, bishop to e6, launching here new attacking opportunities, maybe maneuvering here the bishop towards this side. Now rook to g8 is going to happen, maybe even bishop to d6 with I don't know, e4 ideas. Then we're targeting maybe the g3. So white has really some problems here. Black is here really a pleasant game. So bishop to e4, we have rook to c7, we have bishop to g6, and now rook to e7, we have rook to d1. If you take now the pawn on e5 immediately, the problem is now actually the queen gets a little bit trapped here. It's really wild how the bishops and the rooks are functioning here, because you get this one, bishop to g4, the queen is under fire, and look at this, you don't have good squares for the queen. The most important piece here is the rook that's controlling many squares for the queen on the f file. Now the queen has only one square. You can maybe play queen to d5, but look at this now, a rook to d8. Now if you don't want to lose your queen, you have to play queen to c4, but look at this now, bishop to g1 with the discover attack, and the queen is lost anyway. So as I said, this is really wild how, for instance, in the position queen to e5, actually the queen gets trapped. So that's why here after move rook to e7, here Leelenstein noticed, of course, this tactical problems, played simply a rook from b to d1. We have rook to g8 attacking now the bishop. We have in the continuation finally now queen to e5, but it's a different position now because the rook is not on the f file anymore. When it was on the f file, then queen to e5 wasn't possible, because okay, you could try maybe bishop to g4, but actually the queen can now escape to f4, and as I said, then afterwards of course you can escape to c1. So it's a different position than the one before. So that's why it's not working. After move queen to e5 here, Stockfish played bishop to d7. Now queen to h5 happened, and okay, Stockfish lost the pawn. It doesn't matter, it's an open game. It's a game where the king is so naked here. The king is really weird. Both of the bishops are aiming, the rooks are very active. So here it's a really funny game for black to play. So we have here rook to g7 attacking now the bishop twice. We have rook to d5, bishop to a7, f4, and now bishop to g4. The queen has only the square. We have queen to e5, and now bishop to f2 attacking the rook, but also attacking the pawn on g3. We have rook to f1, and now a stunning tactical shot, bishop to g3 here by Stockfish 15. Look at this, decoying the king towards the g file where both of these rooks are. You can guess what is going to happen. This is now a monstrous tactical shot, bishop to g3 after king to g3. Look at this, bishop to h3. Now the rook is hanging, king to f2 was played by Leelenstein, and now queen to g4. Look at this. I think many of us would make this mistake. Rook to g6. This is not working because after knight to g6, and okay, rook to g6, the problem is now rook to g1 is getting out of this mess. You can compete here, and even if you try, I don't know, here's something like bishop to f1. If you try to get your material back, then you get the fourth. That's the main issue, and the game is, I think, over here for whites, for black, pardon me. So that's why you should not be greedy. Here rook to g6, as I said, is not working. So that's why after move king to f2 here, a very important move by Stockfish 15. Stockfish is keeping the tension, is including now the queen into the game, and is now attacking the knight on h4. So here in the continuation we have queen to f6 protecting everything, and now finally rook to g6. Now Stockfish decoyed the queen and the knight here. You have to play here rook to d8 in order to prolong the game. If you play knight to g6, this is not working because of this tactic, queen to g2. You have to move your king. Now we can take out the rook, and look at this rook is hanging. Okay, you can maybe try here this kind of a fork, but look at this, this comes with a check. You get this one, rook to g2 again with a check, and now with queen to d2 you get a checkmate here. So that's not working now. This knight to e7 fork is simply too slow in this types of tactics. So here after move rook to g6, as we said, rook to d8, you don't have time to take out here the rook, so that's why rook to d8. We have king to a7, knight to g6, but now after rook to g6 there is only one good move here by Leelenstein, queen to d4. But look at this now, this is now really beautiful move, b6 by Stockfish 15. And look what happens. Actually, white doesn't have a good check anymore because this square is taken by the rook and the queen, and this square is also taken, so you don't have time to play here the move rook to d7 because here this square is covered twice by the bishop and the queen. So really I'm not sure where Stockfish can calculate this everything, but as I said, this is now a really cool method here, b6, not allowing any checks. Now the rook is hanging, and the most important thing is here after queen to e4, here in the continuation we have even this check. Now look at this, the rook is coming to game, still this rook is hanging, still this rook is hanging, so it's now completely lost game here for white. So here rook to f3 was played by Leelenstein, and now after rook to f3 in this position Leelenstein resigned. So let's see possible continuations. If you play queen to f3, the problem is now you get queen to d8. Okay, you can maybe take out the bishop, but now with queen to d3 the queen is lost on the third rank. You can move the king but lose the queen and it's game over. Of course, if you take with the king here on f3, then we simply take out here we'll simply take out the rook, and even if you try some checks we can always cover, and still the game is over, of course, here for white. So great game, I think, by Stockfish 15 in the Paulson French, with beautiful tactical motifs, and I think the critical and the sort of novelty here in the game was this beautiful maneuver. Let's go to this moment where Stockfish played here this move rook to c8, and then played here rook to c7 and maneuvered here the king to a8. Really good defensive idea. Stayed with the tension here on the queen side with the move rook to c8. Stockfish controlled also for the c file, which was very important, as you saw, in order to keep some kind of a defensive structure. And then when the king was secured, then it was simply time to break the position with move f6. You saw when the position got opened, then the beast came out, and it was a beautiful tactical game. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. This was really interesting. I think you can apply some of these methods in your games, at least some ideas. You see, when you maybe are cornered, sort of, when you don't know where to castle, maybe you can apply this beautiful defensive motif. If you want to see more beautiful games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series with some more games by Stockfish and also some other top engines. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.